They said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" And he said, "There, in the tent." Genesis 18:9. Well, I'm looking forward to spending a few weeks in my favourite book of the Bible. Well, I love the whole Bible, but Genesis has to be among the most ancient, the most sophisticated, and the most skillfully constructed pieces of writing in human history. We don't know when it was first written down, but almost certainly its roots go way back into pre-literate oral history. It would have been refined over centuries by the finest storytellers the world has ever known. It's easy to underestimate it because of its simplicity. But its simplicity is actually an indication of how highly refined it is. Like a stone worn smooth. When you're working with a document that is as finely honed as this one, you know that every word has been deliberately chosen. And so when I read these words, "Where is your wife, Sarah?" I don't think that all that's going on here is that these messengers have just enjoyed a good meal and they want to give their compliments to the chef. I think, where have I read words like this before in this book? What echoes are resounding here that might give clues to the overall meaning of the text? Where is your wife, Sarah? Where is your brother, Abel? These are the only two times that these words appear like this in Genesis, and both times they are spoken by God or God's messengers. Where is your brother, Abel? These words were spoken to Cain in Genesis 4 after he had murdered his brother. He had a responsibility to honour and protect and nurture his own kin, but instead he had killed him. Where is your wife, Sarah? These two stories are brought together by this similarity for us to compare and contrast them. And the biggest contrast I see here is that Cain recognised that he had done the wrong thing, and Abraham did not. Cain tried to hide his crime, yet Abraham answered without shame. She's out in the tent. Abraham and Sarah had both contributed to preparing this meal, and yet Sarah had not been introduced to the guests, and Sarah had not been invited to share in that lavish hospitality the guests had been provided. Earlier in their marriage, Abraham had placed Sarah in grave danger by insisting that she pretend to be his sister. And he had allowed the Egyptian Pharaoh to take her into his harem. He did not lift a finger to rescue her, but God saw her predicament, and it was God who rescued her. Abraham seems to have no remorse about the way he had treated his wife, Sarah. That's just the way women were treated in his family and his culture. Why should he act any differently? He couldn't see the injustice in his world, even when he was the perpetrator. But God saw it. God is the God who sees. Now, we tend to like our story characters to wear a white hat or a black hat. We want them to be consistently good or bad. But the Bible is too sophisticated and too real for that. The only character in the Bible who doesn't get a grey hat is Jesus. Abraham did the right thing every now and then. And Sarah? Well, she was a perpetrator of abuse as well as a victim. Sarah and Abraham had conspired to sexually exploit a slave girl who was in their power in order for Abraham to keep her baby. And once she was pregnant, Sarah had abused her so badly that she had run away into the wilderness where she had no hope of survival. But God saw Hagar and gave her strength to go back and endure this intolerable situation for a few more years. When Sarah's son Isaac was born, Abraham and Sarah had no further use for the slave girl and her son and sent them away to die in the wilderness. And once again, though, they did not die because God saw them. God heard them. God provided for them and gave them a future. And we'll look at that a bit more next week. Genesis presents us with a God who is very aware of how messed up our world is, how messed up human relationships can be. God sees abuse and seeks out the perpetrators and says, "Where is your brother Abel? Where is your wife, Sarah?" God gives them an opportunity to turn around. But with both Cain and Abraham, God gives them a future anyway, even though they don't repent. And that can be frustrating, can't it? When we read the Bible, we want the bad guys to get what's coming to them. But that almost never happens. And that can be frustrating until we realize that we're all bad guys sometimes. We all benefit from the oppression of others, even when we don't see it because it's hidden behind complicated supply chains. None of us has a white hat. But as we read in Romans 5, God doesn't wait for us to become worthy. God calls us even while we are bad guys and steers us toward a better future. God sees perpetrators and calls them toward a better future, but that is not where God's attention is focused. God is much more preoccupied with the victims of this world. God sees those who are struggling to survive under the heel of someone else's power. God seeks them out, even when they are invisible to the world around them, because they are women, or because they are slaves, or because they are illegitimate, or because they're of the wrong nationality. The most powerless and degraded people of the world are the ones that get the most of God's attention. That's how it was from the beginning in Genesis, and that is what led God to take on human form and live and die as one of us. That's what was in Jesus' heart as he wandered from village to village, teaching and healing. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. That's what was in his heart when he said, "The harvest is plentiful, but the labourers are few." And that's why Jesus sent the 12 out to heal and to liberate, cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. Do your eyes ever glaze over when you read a list like that? Mine do sometimes, because it's all very nice that Jesus gave his disciples those capabilities, but how's that relevant to us? Most of us can't do those things. And I think it would be safe to bet that every person here or at home has at some stage prayed desperately for the power to heal the sick or to raise the dead, and has been left feeling useless and powerless. Jesus was not just telling his disciples to go out and perform spectacular miracles. They did, but that wasn't the point. Jesus had compassion on the crowds, and so sent his followers to them to see the invisible people, the oppressed and the powerless, and cure them, raise them, cleanse them, release them. Maybe we don't have miraculous gifts, but we can still look at the world around us with God's eyes, with God's heart, and see just how many of the people around us are harassed and helpless. Maybe we can't lay a hand on a sick person and make them instantly well, but we can support efforts to bring quality healthcare to people who can least afford it. We can notice people who are living without hope and bring a little bit of light into their life. We can notice people who are shunned and shamed in our world and reach out to them. And we can notice people and systems that are in the grip of destructive forces and bring the good news of Jesus' victory over evil. God is the God who sees. God sees the wounds of our world, the broken people, the oppressive systems, the wounded planet. God sees, and God seeks, and God sends. God sent Jesus, and in every generation, Jesus sends disciples. Jesus sends us to heal, to raise, to cleanse, and to release. And so as you go into the world, may the compassion of Christ go with you. Amen.